Can you imagine finding out your entire life was a lie, built on a foundation of betrayal by the very person who was supposed to love and protect you most? What if I told you that my own mother, the woman I trusted implicitly, had been secretly siphoning off my deceased father's multi-million-dollar fortune, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt and a shattered sense of reality? Was I wrong for unleashing hell on her when the truth finally came crashing down? Tell me honestly, would you have done the same thing if your mother had stolen your inheritance and plotted against you for years? It all started, or so I thought, with my father's sudden death 5 years ago. He was a brilliant, self-made man, a quiet but incredibly successful entrepreneur who had built an empire from the ground up. He owned several tech companies, invested wisely, and had a knack for turning everything he touched into gold. My mother, on the other hand, was a homemaker, charming and seemingly devoted, always by his side at social events, but never truly involved in the business. Someone who listens before lecturing, and from a young age, my father always told me that everything he built was for my future. He instilled in me a strong work ethic and a desire to be independent, but also assured me that I would never have to worry financially. His sudden heart attack, at only 58, was a shock that ripped our family apart. I was 22 at the time, still finishing college, and utterly devastated. The grief was overwhelming, and honestly, I barely registered the financial specifics during the funeral arrangements and the initial period of mourning. I just wanted my dad back. My mother, Clara, seemed to be handling things with remarkable stoicism. She was always the picture of grace, even in sorrow. She told me not to worry about anything, that she would take care of all the legal and financial matters. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my mom. She sat me down a few weeks after the funeral and explained that while Dad had been very successful, his investments were complex and tied up in various trusts and businesses. She said that his will was a bit complicated, stipulating that the bulk of his estate would remain in a trust managed by her, ensuring both our financial security, but with access being gradual and controlled. She emphasized that this was to protect me, to prevent me from making rash decisions with a large sum of money at a young age. It made sense to me. My dad was always careful and pragmatic. I just wanted to grieve in peace, and her taking charge was a comfort at the time. Life went on, or at least a new version of it did. I finished college, got a good job in marketing, and started building my own career. My mother continued to live in our sprawling family home, a beautiful estate that my father had lovingly restored. She maintained a comfortable lifestyle, though she always subtly complained about the expenses of running such a large property and the stress of managing my father's complicated finances. I never questioned it. She would occasionally give me a small sum, a few thousand here and there, when I needed to pay for something significant, like a down payment on a car or a particularly expensive trip, but always with a sigh about how tight things were. It made me feel guilty for asking, and I tried to be as self-sufficient as possible. I worked hard, paid my own rent, and lived a relatively modest life, always believing that the real inheritance was there, just not yet fully accessible. My relationship with my mother slowly began to shift. She became increasingly distant, often brushing off my calls and visits with excuses about being busy or unwell. She started going on expensive trips with her new friends, women I had never met before, and spending lavishly on designer clothes and jewelry. When I gently brought up her sudden extravagance, she would get defensive, accusing me of being ungrateful and reminding me how much she had sacrificed for me. I felt a growing unease, a gnawing feeling that something wasn't right, but I pushed it down, attributing it to my own insecurities and the lingering pain of losing my father. The first major red flag appeared when I tried to get a mortgage for my first apartment. The bank asked for proof of assets, specifically mentioning any inherited funds or trust accounts. I explained the situation with my father's estate and my mother managing the trust. They asked for documentation, which I then requested from my mother. She stalled, making excuses, saying the paperwork was with her lawyers, or not easily accessible. After weeks of badgering, she finally sent me a vague letter from an unknown law firm, stating that my father's estate was still in probate, due to its complexity, and that the funds were illiquid. This struck me as odd. 5 years after his death, I decided to consult an independent lawyer just to understand the process better. That's when the real nightmare began. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was a sharp, no-nonsense man. He took one look at the documents my mother provided and raised an eyebrow. He explained that 5 years was an unusually long time for a complex estate to remain in probate, unless there were significant disputes or attempts to hide assets. He began to investigate, and what he uncovered was a meticulously crafted web of deceit that made my stomach churn. It turned out my father had, in fact, left a very clear and concise will. He had explicitly divided his assets into 2 main portions, a substantial sum to my mother, enough to ensure her comfort for the rest of her life, and the vast majority of his fortune, easily in the tens of millions, was placed into a testamentary trust specifically for me. This trust was designed to provide for my education, future endeavors, and eventually full access to the principal once I reached the age of 30, with a significant lump sum released at 25. The will had also appointed an independent, reputable financial institution as the trustee, not my mother. My mother had systematically forged documents, bribed lower-level legal clerks, and manipulated the system to make it appear as if she was the sole executor and primary beneficiary. She had diverted funds from my trust into her own accounts, liquidated assets that were meant for me, and essentially rewritten my father's will through fraudulent means. Mr. Henderson showed me bank statements, property deeds, and legal documents that clearly demonstrated her scheme. She had been living a life of luxury on my inheritance, while telling me that money was tight and making me believe I was a burden. The friends she traveled with were often people connected to the shady financial dealings she was involved in. She was actively disinheriting me, not just by withholding funds, but by systematically stealing them. The shock was paralyzing. I felt a cold, crushing weight in my chest. My mother, the woman who raised me, who held me when I cried, who told me she loved me, had been orchestrating this elaborate theft for years. Every hug, every "I love you," every moment of shared grief over my father felt tainted, a performance to mask her true intentions. I looked at the photos of my father, his kind, loving face, and felt a profound sadness. He had worked so hard to secure my future, and she had dismantled it all. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was faced with undeniable proof that my own mother had committed financial fraud against me, stealing my entire inheritance and making me believe I was penniless. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted her gently, tried to work it out, or would you have gone for absolute justice, no matter the cost to your relationship? I didn't choose gentleness. The betrayal ran too deep. The anger was a roaring fire inside me. Mr. Henderson advised me that we had an incredibly strong case for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. He said we could not only reclaim my inheritance, but also press criminal charges. The thought of putting my mother in jail was agonizing, but the thought of letting her get away with it, continuing to live a lavish life on my father's stolen money while I struggled, was even worse. I decided to confront her, but not in person. I wanted to see her reaction without giving her a chance to manipulate me further. I sent her a certified letter, drafted by Mr. Henderson, detailing all the evidence we had uncovered and outlining the legal actions we intended to take. It was a cold, clinical document, devoid of any personal emotion, just the facts. I attached copies of the fraudulent documents she had used. I wanted her to know that I knew everything and that I wasn't backing down. Her reaction was swift and predictable. She called me, screaming, crying, begging, threatening. She accused Mr. Henderson of being a con artist, me of being ungrateful, and my father of being a terrible husband who left her nothing. She tried to gaslight me, saying I was imagining things, that I was crazy, that she was only trying to protect me. But I had the evidence. I held firm. I told her that I knew the truth, and that unless she agreed to fully cooperate and return every penny, I would pursue every legal avenue available, both civil and criminal. She didn't believe me at first. She truly thought she was untouchable, but Mr. Henderson was relentless. He filed all the necessary paperwork, froze her assets, and initiated criminal proceedings. When the official summons arrived and her bank accounts were suddenly inaccessible, her composure finally shattered. She hired her own lawyers, expensive ones, but they quickly realized the depth of the hole she had dug for herself. The evidence was overwhelming. The legal battle was long and emotionally draining. It wasn't a quick victory. There were depositions, court appearances, and endless negotiations. She tried every trick in the book, feigning illness, claiming mental distress, even trying to blame my father's former business partners. But the paper trail was too clear, and the independent trustee named in my father's original will, the one she had bypassed, provided damning testimony against her. In the end, faced with overwhelming evidence and the very real possibility of a lengthy prison sentence, my mother caved. She agreed to a settlement. It wasn't everything, as some of the money she had spent was gone forever, but it was enough. The vast majority of my inheritance, tens of millions of dollars, was returned to the proper trust, now under the management of the independent institution my father had originally chosen. She was forced to sell the family home, which hurt, but it was part of the restitution. She was also subjected to significant financial penalties and a permanent injunction preventing her from ever accessing or managing any part of my father's estate again. The criminal charges were ultimately dropped as part of the settlement, a decision I agonized over but ultimately agreed to, as the civil victory felt like enough. I didn't want to spend years in court, constantly reopening the wound. The aftermath was a strange mix of relief and profound sadness. I had my inheritance back, secured in a professionally managed trust, and I finally had the financial freedom my father had always intended for me. But I had also lost my mother. Our relationship was irrevocably shattered. She moved into a small apartment, far from her previous life of luxury, and we no longer speak. She still sends occasional, rambling emails, filled with blame and self-pity, but I don't respond. I had to create a firewall to protect myself. The woman I thought was my mother died the day I uncovered her betrayal. In her place was a stranger, a thief, who happened to share my DNA. I've since used a portion of my inheritance to start my own business, something my father would have been proud of. I'm building something real, something ethical. I live comfortably, but not extravagantly. I learned the hard way that true wealth isn't just about money. It's about integrity, trust, and the people you surround yourself with. The scars of that betrayal will always be there, a constant reminder of how easily appearances can deceive, even within your own family. It was a painful lesson, but one that ultimately made me stronger and far more resilient. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. So, if you've been through a similar experience, where trust was shattered and loyalty betrayed, you understand the depth of that wound. It's not just about the money. It's about the fundamental disrespect and the obliteration of your world view. Like this video if you were on my side, if you think I did the right thing by pursuing justice. Subscribe for more stories like this, stories of unexpected twists and faltering betrayals. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far? Or was it justified? I'll see you all in the next story.